Hi, I'm David MacNeal. I'm the author of Bugged, The Insects That Rule the World and the People Obsessed with Them.
And what's your role here at RV Pro?
And at RV Pro, I am the digital content editor, which puts me in, charge of the website, anything digital, social media, you name it.
So could you walk us through a day?
Yeah. Essentially, I come in at 8 o'clock, try to be here as soon as possible. With my coffee. And first thing I do in the morning is assemble all the news stories for our newsletter, which goes out daily during the week. And we do about 10 stories a day, get that out by 10:30 Mountain Time for our readers in the East Coast so they could read it during their lunch hour, like 12:30. And so once the newsletter is done, the rest of my day is posting, making social media posts, tracking down news stories, fielding blog ideas from people, and then editing and writing, whatever stories.
Great. So, I'm going to ask you a different question to start off.
Oh, sure.
So, can you talk a little bit first about the difference between a feature story and a news story?
Oh, man. Hard news versus feature news. So, as far as hard news and feature note, a feature story versus hard news. The difference there is that by the time you write feature stories, you've had generally experience writing hard news. And the reason why that's important is because you're still telling a fact-based story, but this time now you've kind of proven yourself I know how to get information. And now I could take a little bit more, there's a little bit more freedom to tell it with a literary kind of bent, So let's say you profile or you're writing about a serial killer. Fun stuff like that. The hard news story, you just go fact, and by order of importance, starting with the inverted pyramid, all that fun stuff. With a feature story, instead of just saying the murderer was taken to his sentencing hearing or whatever, maybe you might talk about what he had for breakfast and how he ate his meal. So a feature story allows more insight, more liberty than you would get with hard news. And allows for some really compelling storytelling and gives you a better glimpse at humanity, I'd say.
Okay, and now, in any kind of story, there's usually some kind of interviewing involved.
Mm-hmm.
How do you prepare for an interview?
Right. Interview preparation. So it's, you spend a good amount of time, a fair amount of time, depends on the interview and the story, how much information you want to get, and what you're after. Some interviews might be 5 minutes, just background information. Some might be an hour. And what you're after, I don't know. It totally depends. But you do your research. You allow yourself, you write the questions down, a fair amount, making sure you're going to cover your bases. But then during the interview, you have to use active listening. And what that allows is you to come up with questions on the fly. The person might say something that catches your attention, and then you want to ask more questions on that, but you still have your outline to eventually bring back the interview to what you're really trying to get. It's kind of just like with writing a story. You set out to do one story, you come back with another. during an interview, you might ask these questions knowing to help add a support argument to the story, but you might gain something else entirely. So the interview is important. It's very important to have your outline, but then also be ready to just listen, write down like future questions you want to ask as they're talking. And I suggest, this is for after the interview, but transcribing, people have left journalism because of the transcribing. So there's a lot of digital tools out there now, like happyscribe.com. Not an advocate, I'm not getting paid for that, where you could just automatically have things translated for you and you could see the transcripts.
Now,
very helpful.
You're talking about transcribing, so that means you record your interviews.
I do record my interviews. I'm a very slow writer. Just handwritten, it takes me forever, and really I can't even decipher my own writing sometimes. And like sometimes it'll be one word things, and I just like, but it depends on the story. Like if you're going to, let's say, cover could be like what are those not hearings, but what is that called? Investor meeting or something like that.
Right, like a board meeting or something.
Yeah, like you don't want to listen to the whole thing because you'll just hate yourself. So yeah, it's fine just to, either turn on the recorder when you're ready or when it's, they're leading up to something you want to hear, or just if you're not writing too many quotes, you're just there for information. Yeah, just write it down. Regardless, I think as you write your story, the quotes are going to be kind of cleaned up a little bit. You don't want the ums, the ers, and people say just a lot. It doesn't have to be verbatim, but the context has to be verbatim. It has to be exactly what they said.
Yeah, that leads us to the next question, which is about quotes.
Cool.
When you use them, when it's best to paraphrase,
right.
when all of that kind of information in terms of like using quotes well.
Right. And so you're using quotes to support your story. If people wanted to just hear exactly what a person would say, they would either A, listen to your entire interview, or B, look at a security camera. You are the storyteller. And so paraphrasing becomes important because I wish I could paraphrase a lot of what I'm saying. Instead of taking a few paragraphs or sentences, it might just take like a sentence or two to say.
So it helps with concision, making things more concise.
Yep, absolutely.
One of the things that is very common advice for new reporters and new writers is to know what to quote and what not to quote. You don't need to put in quotation marks that the coach said the game's going to start at 7:00 on Friday. You can put that kind of factual information just into the story or in a little box on the side. Mm-hmm. What do you want to quote? Let's stick with our, high school basketball team. They're going to the championships.
Let's say, you're reporting on a high school basketball game. Where would you want to quote? You'd want to quote where there's opinion, when there's insight, when it lends to someone's personality, when it just sounds good, even, that's essentially it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Any other tips? Anything you want to add to the art of interviewing, if you will?
The interview thing. Well, I'd say it's almost worth even like if you're taking classes or you just want to watch some shows. I find often like psychology fits into a lot of it. Letting them arrive at the points you kind of want to get to, instead of trying to get it out of them, if that makes sense. It's not manipulation so much as like kind of guiding. them. And yeah, it's not manipulation. You're just
People won't tell you what they don't want to tell you, but some
Exactly.
people are, not everyone is accustomed to being interviewed.
right. And if you want to be, whenever I hear someone, I've learned my lessons. Like when I first started off, there was a quote from this one person that I wish I didn't include, that I included merely for the sake of like just, I don't know. I knew it would raise eyebrows and all that kind of stuff. But it kind of hurt their business in the end. Now, it was a bad thing that they said, and what I should have done was like, are you sure you want to say that, or would you like that to be off the record? God, what's that one like kind of additive, or not additive, but like saying in journalism? It's like protect the ones you're serving, or something like that, or what is it?
Right, I don't know exactly what quote you're talking about, but I imagine it would be something like, you don't want to hurt your sources in pursuit of the story.
Yeah.
Unless, of course, you're doing investigative journalism and
Right.
your source is the bad guy.
Right.
But most of the time, especially at a publication like RV Pro, which is a trade publication,
Yeah.
you don't do a lot of down and dirty investigative reporting.
Not really at all, actually.
So, you might be dealing with someone who's uncomfortable being interviewed, but you're not dealing necessarily with someone who has secrets that you need to pry out of them.
Right. Right.
Investigative journalism is a whole separate class.
Yes, it is. Yeah,
Well,
trade.
just-
I found like coming back, from a journalism background, going into trade and B2B reporting, it's very different. It's not bad. I mean, it's just you have to know what audience you're serving.
And that's important. Maybe you can talk a little bit about audience in general, and maybe it's easier to talk about like who is the RV Pro audience, so that you can talk about that in a more detailed way. Either way is fine.
Oh, okay. Well, I mean, the RV Pro audience, we are a niche publication, and we go out to about, I think, 15,000 is what we print off, something like that. I always forget the number, but small enough. And so we serve people that own dealerships, that run an RV manufacturing plant, the higher ups in the industry, or people that like are just have their own business. So that's our audience, and what we try to do is help them in ways with things they didn't know they needed, or lend insight to something that they just had no idea existed, or I don't know, just to tell a good story about the industry. And that's essentially our audience, and that differs greatly from a general consumer audience.
And so, how does it differ? How does the trade audience differ from a consumer audience?
So consumers, let's see, consumer versus trade. A consumer audience, it's kind of everyone. You still have your demographic you're after, depending on your type of publication. Say you're Wired, you're going to want to go after the tech people that are not so tech savvy, people interested in politics, cybersecurity, just forward-thinking kind of advances. And so, but that could be anyone. It's not people in that industry, it's people outside of it.
So let's look at, for example, RV Pro in the industry, some magazine read by people who own RVs. I'm sure you know a dozen of them. So what are the differences between those two audiences? Because that way at least we're doing like
Right.
sort of apples to apples,
Yeah.
kind of. At least we're all in the produce department.
Right. Let's see. So in the case of RV Pro versus something like Motorhome magazine, or just travel magazine, those are going to be geared towards people that maybe are planning a trip, consuming something, buying the latest product, learning about the latest show where there's going to be more products to be sold. A B2B audience, like for what we do, that's going to be kind of similar, but like the products they're buying could be, I don't know, the new product line from Airstream. So quite different. It could be a new line of air conditioners.
When I explain it, I say that a consumer magazine is trying to sell you a camera. A trade magazine is trying to get you to carry their whole line of cameras.
Mm-hmm.
So that
Yeah.
that seems
same thing. Like
right. So that your advertisers are going to be different and your stories are going to be different because, and it always comes back to your audience is different.
Mm-hmm.
And while the same person might read RV Pro and Motorhome, they're reading them for different reasons.
Yeah. B2B is very focused on the smallest viable market. Like if we can make that succeed, we'll continue to be in print in 2019 going forward. And like versus other magazines, it's for, consumer, it's a bit more scary because that's a wider audience you're trying to reach.
You need much bigger numbers.
Yeah, much bigger numbers.
So I know that you don't receive a lot of query letters in this position.
Yeah.
But I also know that outside of this position, you
Mm-hmm.
write query letters
Mm-hmm.
and you look at them. So can you talk a little bit about how you put one together?
Yeah. Let's see. So I could speak on like querying magazines.
Yeah,
Is
perfect.
that cool? Okay. So the first thing you do is maybe you have a story you want to write. Or there's a magazine you want to write for. Either way, you have to read up, study that magazine. You have to understand their voice, what type of stories they publish. These are things that are going to help you in succeeding with a pitch.
When you say
Yeah.
you have to understand their voice, can you unpack that a little bit? Maybe somebody's
Yeah.
never heard that phrase before.
So stylistically, and I hate returning to it, but like I'll return to let's just say Wired magazine has a bit more of a snarky tone, bit more. Maybe it's changed a little bit, but like there's some levity there, and they could still be colorful, but they're also direct. Something like 5280, it's going to be a little bit similar, but you have to talk in terms of local, like what is the local impact. 5280 is a regional magazine in Denver County, all of Colorado, but it's based in downtown Denver, and that's for the large part, that's the majority audience market they serve. So yeah, studying up on the magazine, emulating their style if you can. And what that does is it shows an editor, okay, I know your voice. I know what you guys are into. I'm not just sending you something blindly like, oh, I heard this cool story. I want to write about it for you guys. It's like, okay, well, you could have done a little bit more work. And I mean, if you like reading and learning about these things anyway, you're probably going to be checking out these magazines regardless. So I think that is one of the first steps. And then the next step is to, if you can, reach out to the person you want to pitch. Now, if I'm pitching a national magazine, I'm not going to send my inquiry to the editor-in-chief. That'll not be opened. But maybe I find out the email address of an assistant editor, associate editor, someone lower on the totem pole that like you can actually have a conversation with. And that's your entry point. And what I do, what I've done in the past, and I found it worked really well, was just to send an introductory email. This is who I am. Maybe I've just graduated college and like I really want to write for you guys. I had this one idea. Maybe just keep it to a sentence or two. And it's like, would you mind if I send a pitch to you or whomever you might recommend? And then, that's your starting point. You want the most important thing, and I think this is common amongst in any industry, is relationships. You want to be able to network with people because you never know where they're going to go. You never know where you're going to go. That could be lower, higher. I mean, careers vary and change all the time. And so it's the most important thing is just to be a good person, decent, you'll feel better, they'll be happier. So yeah, you send your introductory email and you already have your idea. They say yes, hopefully. And maybe you could send it to this person. And then you write your pitch. Now the pitch, and apologies if this is long-winded, but I mean, there is a craft to pitching. I would say it is one of the most important things to do because you are selling yourself. And if you don't have like a good amount of, good deal of works under your belt, it's hard to get noticed at first. It takes some time. It could. So the pitch. Now you have to take a look at the story you're wanting to write. You're not going to want to send them the whole story. That won't be read. What you want to do is sell someone on the finest points of your story in the shortest amount of time. And that's a great benefit to you because, yeah, you do a few hours of research depending on the size of the story. And you send that in. Maybe 3 paragraphs if it's going to be like 1,000 words or something like that, or maybe 500 words. Just something quick because they are getting pitches all the time. And I mean, like me having gotten pitches in the past, me have sent many pitches. The ones that get accepted are generally like, there's a good angle to it that is like fit towards them already because you've done your research. And the way you're writing about it, there's an energy and like excitement about it. And perhaps if it's, I'd say magazine or any type of medium, you have a visual component to it. Because this day and age, you have to have a visual component, whether it's imagery or just video or graph. You have to show them the ability, or that you are thinking with a visual kind of like mindset, because you know what sells. Now this is for general markets, consumer markets, and so yeah, if you have your 3 paragraphs, you send that to the person you already talked to. They take a look, and then maybe it gets taken to their pitch meeting. Wait patiently. People get a lot of emails. And you don't want to be the one that's constantly bombarding them and bothering them. So just have faith that you've made contact. They said they were going to read it. And maybe it gets to the next step, the pitch meeting. And maybe they get back to you. Maybe they don't. Maybe you just wait a week to inquire and see where things are at. For a feature story, though, I do recommend, when it comes to your background research, I recommend interviews and doing at least like 10 hours of research. Your pitch for a feature, depending on how long you want to make it, well, even if it's like anywhere from 2,000 to 8,000 words, just make the pitch, if you can, 1 page long, single-spaced. What this does is shows that you know what the story is. You can tell all of it like real quick with knowing that like all the juicy bits you really want to put in there, that'll be coming later. What you have is like just an exciting thing, something compelling on its own.
You mentioned that you want to make sure that you take an angle that's appropriate for the publication.
Mm-hmm.
First off, can you talk just a little bit about what you mean by angle?
By the way, is everything good? I haven't seen a red light on this.
I see a red light here.
It is recording?
It seems to be, it's counting. It's counting, and there's a
Okay.
red light here.
Oh, interesting.
So-
I thought for sure there would have been. Okay, sorry.
No, that's okay.
Sorry, ask your question again.
It's quite all right. It's quite all right. Can you unpack for them a little bit the idea of what you mean by angle to begin with? Like when you say it has to have the right angle for the publication, so maybe you can think of any publication and what would be the right angle for them and what might be like the wrong angle for them.
Okay.
I know that's asking a lot on the spur of the moment.
I'm just trying to. God. Let's see.
And you can even use RV Pro
Probably-
if that makes it easier.
I'll use a real life example, and I hate to go back to Wired, but like I
Go ahead.
wrote a lot of stories for them. Okay, so here's like two examples of an angle. Wired had put out that they're doing a health section in one of their issues, and so I found a story that I thought was really interesting, and it hadn't been written about in the way I wanted to do. My angle was to write about insect sushi nutritional value. So, because like people had written about insect sushi and all that stuff, and said it was nutritious and all that kind of, you get this vitamin, blah, blah, blah. But no one actually broke down just exactly like each little minute little detail about what that nutrition meant. And so that was my pitch to Wired, to write about like 4 different sushi rolls and I don't know, the nutritional value of each of them. Just something you wouldn't see anywhere else. And that's kind of what an angle is. Like
So if you wanted to
Yeah.
write that same story,
Sure. For a culinary magazine, it might be me going out to try the insect sushi and me describing the flavors. That might be the angle for that. Or if I'm writing towards an entomological, like society type paper or magazine, or even National Geographic, perhaps my story is about insect sushi and how culturally it might be accepted in different areas and all that kind of stuff. Or even if I want to take it a step farther, farther, one of them. If I wanted to take it a step further, I would write about the economic impact. If it was for like Forbes magazine, perhaps, like what kind of money is there to be made off of insect sushi? So for all these different outlets, there are different angles and approaches you could take. I just took one thing, insect sushi, and I just pitched 5 different magazines. So that is your angle.
there you go. And that was an excellent explanation. Thank you very much. Do you have any advice for people who are interested in getting into the media world?
Depends.
Okay. On what?
What do you hope to accomplish?
Let's say someone who wants to become a journalist.
Okay.
Let's start with a news
Yeah.
publication.
Okay. Oh. So what is my advice? Like,
Do you have any advice for that person? Then we'll go to another person.
yeah, let's do that. I could only relate, like, I'm a magazine person, so I never actually did a newspaper per se. But from what I've heard and what many people have told me is that just when I think any kind of medium really, just get in as early as possible. Show that you're interested. whether it be an internship, whether it be just saying, hey, I want to write this story for you guys. Even if you get rejected, which you're going to get rejected a lot in this industry, but it's part of the learning process. Eventually, the rejections start to slow down if you've done it enough and been able to learn from it. It's not failure. I mean, it is in a way, but failure is important because you need to learn and move beyond it and improve. That's just life.
So let's say our
Yeah.
person wants to become either a freelance magazine writer or to get a position at a magazine as a writer on a
Right.
magazine staff.
I reckon, in those cases, I highly recommend an internship. Wherever you could get an internship that's geared towards what you want, just strive for that. And if it's not exactly what you want, still find something that's like close enough. I want to write for this magazine. I want to write on like topic of science, technology, but I can't get in there just yet. So I'm going to do a lateral move and write about, I don't know, write for men's fashion or whatever it is. Chances are, it'll show